We are back with the historical figures Iceberg. This one's got some pretty big names. One of them will shock you. Subscribe, please. Christopher Columbus. We start with Christopher Columbus, the man who made one of the most significant voyages in human history. Columbus was born in 1451 in Genoa, Italy, into a family of wool weavers. Growing up near the sea, Columbus became fascinated with sailing and exploration. Growing up, he worked on merchant ships. By late 1400s, European countries were desperate to find new trade routes to Asia. Spices, silk, and other goods from Asia were highly valued, but getting there was difficult due to long overland routes and the dominance of Middle Eastern powers in controlling the sea trade. Columbus had an idea. Why not reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean? Most educated people knew the Earth was round, but they didn't realize how big it was. Columbus believed Asia was much closer than it actually was. Columbus pitched this idea to several European monarchs, but they weren't convinced. It took years, but finally in 1492, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain agreed to fund his expedition. They provided him with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. On August 3rd, 1492, Columbus and his crew set sail from Spain, heading west into uncharted waters. After a long and challenging journey, on October 12, 1492, they spotted land. Columbus thought he had reached islands up the coast of Asia, but he was actually in the Bahamas. He called people he encountered Indians, believing he'd reached the Indies. Over the next few months, Columbus explored parts of the Caribbean, including what is now Cuba and Hispaniola, which is modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Columbus returned to Spain as a hero and made 3 more voyages to the Americas. He explored more of the Caribbean and parts of Central and South America, always believing he was near Asia. During these voyages, he established settlements and initiated contact between Europe and the indigenous peoples of the Americas. However, his encounters were not peaceful for long. Columbus's expeditions marked the beginning of European colonization in the Americas, leading to the exchange of goods, animals, plants, diseases, and cultural practices, a period known as the Columbian Exchange. Columbus's later years were marked by controversy. His harsh treatment of indigenous peoples included enslavement and brutal punishments, drew criticism even from his contemporaries. He was eventually removed from his position as governor of Hispaniola and returned to Spain in disgrace. Columbus died in 1506, still believing he found a new route to Asia. For centuries, he was celebrated as the man who discovered the Americas and opened a whole new world for exploration and settlement by Europeans. His voyages marked the beginning of sustained contact between Europe and the Americas, reshaping the course of world history. The Columbian Exchange that followed transformed economies, diets, and cultures on both sides of the Atlantic, introducing everything from potatoes and corn to horses and smallpox. Columbus's voyages also set the stage for European colonization of the Americas, which had enormous consequences that everyone can see today, both positive and negative. On the one hand, his journeys paved the way for technological exchange, cultural blending, and economic growth, but on the other hand, they led to centuries of colonization, exploitation, and suffering for indigenous people. While he remains a symbol of exploration and daring ambition for some, he's also a figure associated with the negative impacts of colonization, including the decimation of indigenous populations and cultures. William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare is often hailed as the greatest playwright and poet in the English language. He was born in April 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, a market town along the River Avon, and he was baptized on April 26, so his birthday is traditionally celebrated on April 23rd. His father, John Shakespeare, was a glovemaker and prominent citizen, while his mother, Mary Arden, came from a family with land and wealth. Young William attended the local grammar school, where he would have studied subjects like Latin, rhetoric, and classical literature. Not much is known about his early life, but in 1582, at the age of 18, he married Anne Hathaway, who was 8 years older than him. The couple had 3 children, Susanna, and twins Hamnet and Judith. Tragically, Hamnet died at the age of 11, a loss that may have influenced Shakespeare's later works. By the late 1580s, Shakespeare had moved to London and began working as an actor and playwright. Not much is known about this period, which is known as the Lost Years. By 1592, Shakespeare's name was making waves in London's theatre scene. He became a key member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, a leading theatrical company that later became the King's Men under the patronage of King James I. Shakespeare's career as a playwright took off, and over the next 2 decades, he wrote some of the most famous plays in history. His works can be divided into 3 main categories: comedies, tragedies, and histories. His comedies, like A Midsummer Night's Dream, A Much Ado About Nothing, are full of humor, love triangles, and clever wordplay. His histories, such as Henry V and Richard III, explore England's pasts and his rulers, but it's his tragedies that are often considered his masterpieces. Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth explore deep themes of ambition, love, betrayal, and fate. And they continue to be studied, performed, and admired worldwide to many high school students' dismay. Shakespeare wasn't just a writer, he was also a successful businessman. He co-owned a global theater where many of his plays were performed, and he earned enough to become a wealthy landowner. He often returned to Stratford and eventually retired there at around 1613. Shakespeare died on April 23, 1616, and was buried in the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford. His epitaph famously warns against moving his bones. His plays and poems transformed English literature and drama. Shakespeare had an ability to capture the human experience from love and ambition to jealousy and despair. His characters are deeply complex, relatable, and timeless. Whether it's the Lego, Macbeth, or Romeo and Juliet, his character struggles and emotions continue to resonate with audiences today. Also, his influence on the English language is very apparent. He popularized countless words and phrases that we still use today, such as break the ice, wild goose chase, and all that glitters is not gold. His works have inspired countless adaptations in every medium imaginable: plays, movies, novels, music, and more. Directors and artists have reimagined his stories for every generation, proving that his themes are as relevant today as they were 400 years ago. Shakespeare's plays also shaped the theater itself. He broke away from structures and experimented with complex plots, shifting perspectives and poetic language. He showed that theater could explore the depths of human experience and be both entertaining and thought-provoking. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was born on April 15, 1452, in the town of Vinci near Florence, Italy. He was the illegitimate son of a notary, Pierre da Vinci, and a peasant woman named Caterina. Fast forward to around 14, where he began an apprenticeship with the renowned artist Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. Under Verrocchio's guidance, Leonardo honed his skills in painting, sculpture, and mechanical arts. He quickly surpassed his master. It is said that when Leonardo painted an angel in one of Verrocchio's works, it was so stunning that Verrocchio decided to never paint again. Leonardo's talents earned him a reputation, and by the 1480s, he was working for the ruling Forza family in Milan. During this period, he created some of his most famous works, including The Last Supper, a mural depicting Jesus and his disciples at the moment he reveals that one of them will betray him. The painting's detailed expressions and composition set a new standard for realism and emotion in art. He wasn't just an artist, though. He was a scientist, engineer, and inventor. He filled notebooks with sketches and observations on anatomy, flight mechanics, and botany. He dissected human corpses to better understand how the body worked, producing detailed anatomical drawings that were centuries ahead of their time. He also sketched designs for flying machines, tanks, and other inventions that were far too advanced for his era. In 1503, Leonardo began work on another masterpiece, the Mona Lisa. This portrait of Lisa Gerardini, a merchant's wife, is famous for her smile and the artist's masterful use of fumato, which is a technique that creates soft, blurred edges. The Mona Lisa became one of the most famous and widely recognized paintings in history, and it still draws crowds at the Louvre Museum in Paris. Leonardo worked for various patrons throughout his life, moving between Florence, Milan, Rome, and eventually France, where King Francis I invited him to spend his final years. Leonardo died on May 2nd, 1519, at the Château du Clos-Lucé in France. Da Vinci's art revolutionized the way people saw painting and human expression. His attention to detail, mastery of light and shadow, and ability to capture emotion made his works timeless masterpieces. The Mona Lisa and The Last Supper are considered among the greatest works of art ever created, and they continue to captivate viewers to this day. Leonardo's approach to learning and creativity embodies the spirits of the Renaissance, a time when people sought to understand the world through observation, experimentation, and artistic expression. He was truly a Renaissance man. Abraham. Abraham is a figure revered in everything to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as the father of faith. According to the Bible and other religious traditions, Abraham, originally named Abram, was born in the city of Ur in Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq, around 2000 BCE, though dating can vary. One day, God called him to leave his homeland and to travel to a new land that God would show him. With his wife Sarai, later Sarah, and his nephew Lot, Abraham packed up and traveled west to Canaan. This journey was the beginning of a covenant, a sacred agreement between God and Abraham. God promised to make Abraham the father of a great nation. But there was a problem. Abraham and Sarah were childless, and they were quite old. Desperate for an heir, Sarah encouraged Abraham to have a child with her maidservant, Hagar. This union produced a son, Ishmael, but God had other plans. He promised that Sarah would bear a son, and despite their old age, the promise came true. Sarah gave birth to Isaac, and through him, the covenant with God would continue. One day, God tested him by commanding his sacrifice to Isaac, his beloved son. In an act of deep faith, Abraham prepared to obey. But at that last moment, an angel intervened, stopping the sacrifice. This story showed Abraham's unwavering faith and obedience to God. He became a leader and patriarch, building altars, negotiating with local kings, and even waging war to rescue his nephew Lot. Through it all, he remained committed to his covenant with God. Abraham eventually passed away at an old age and was buried next to Sarah in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron, a site that is still venerated today. Why does he belong this high on the list? Well, he's considered the patriarch of three major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, hence why they are called the Abrahamic religions. In Judaism, he's the first patriarch and the founder of the covenant relationship between God and the Jewish people. In Christianity, Abraham is revered for his faith. The Apostle Paul wrote about Abraham's belief in God as a model of faith and righteousness. Christians see Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac as a foreshadowing of God's own sacrifice of his son Jesus. In Islam, Abraham, known as Ibrahim, is recognized as a prophet and a key figure in submitting to the will of Allah. His son Ishmael is considered an ancestor of the Arab people, and Abraham's actions during his life, including his willingness to sacrifice Ishmael as told in Islamic tradition, are honored during the annual festival of Eid al-Adha. Abraham's life embodies themes of faith, trust, and devotion. His covenant with God and was one of the first examples for monotheism, shaping the spiritual beliefs of billions of people across the world. Moses. Now we got Moses, who is also a really important figure in the history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Moses was born at a time when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt. According to the Bible, the Pharaoh was worried about the growing population of the Israelites and ordered all newborn Hebrew boys to be killed. To save him, Moses' mother placed him in a basket and set it afloat on the Nile River. The baby was found by Pharaoh's daughter, who raised him as her own, making Moses a prince of Egypt. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Enraged, Moses killed the Egyptian, fled Egypt to escape punishment. He ended up in the land of Midian, where he married Zipporah, the daughter of a local priest, and became a shepherd. One day, Moses encountered a burning bush that was on fire, but wasn't consumed by the flames. Through this bush, God spoke to Moses, commanding him to return to Egypt and free the Israelites from slavery. Reluctantly, Moses returned to Egypt, and with the help of his brother Aaron, demanded that Pharaoh let the Israelites go. Pharaoh refused, leading to a series of 10 plagues that devastated Egypt. The final plague, the death of the firstborn, convinced Pharaoh to release the Israelites. This event is commemorated in the Jewish holiday of Passover. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, crossing the Red Sea in a miraculous event where the waters parted, allowing the Israelites to escape and then closing over pursuing Egyptian army. The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years, during which time Moses acted as their leader, mediator, and lawgiver. On Mount Sinai, Moses received 10 commandments from God, stone tablets containing laws that became the moral foundation for much of Western civilization. But Moses' leadership wasn't without challenges. He faced rebellion, doubt, and the burden of leading a large and often discontented group of people. Moses himself was not allowed to enter the Promised Land due to the ancient incident where he struck a rock to bring forth water. Instead of speaking to it as God commanded, he viewed the land from a distance atop Mount Nebo before passing away at the age of 120. His burial place remains unknown. Moses is considered the greatest prophet and lawgiver in Judaism, a key figure in Christianity, and an important prophet in Islam. In Jewish tradition, Moses is the leader who liberated the Israelites from slavery and brought them to the covenant with God on Mount Sinai. The Torah, the central reference of Jewish religions and law and theology, is attributed to him. For Christians, Moses is seen as a precursor to Jesus and a symbol of faith and deliverance. The 10 Commandments he delivered are foundational moral principles for Christianity. His life story is often interpreted as an allegory for spiritual freedom and salvation. In Islam, Moses, known as the Musa, is a highly respected prophet and is mentioned more times in the Quran than any other individual. The moral and ethical laws he delivered continue to shape societies and legal systems around the world.